everyone's bodies are different. And even with regard to like our training cycles and our training plans, men training versus women, there's going to be different approaches that work better for different people. But what will always trump all of that is just being consistent. You've kind of got all the statistical lack of research. I think it's 9% of all research on endurance sports has been done on women. That's absolutely obscene. We're seeing amazing women achieve amazing things. We are in such a bubble of people who are going above and beyond to keep chipping away at those times because we love it, because of our love for the sport and our passion for the community.
So I'm Ali Head. I'm the Senior Health and Sustainability Editor at Marie Claire magazine, and I have been for about coming up to 4 years now. So journalist, always been so passionate about health, well-being, running, obviously. Started my career at Women's Health, but I've also done, I think it's 10, maybe I'm over-exaggerating, I think it's 9 marathons, 3 Boston qualifying times within that. And then I had one 37-mile ultra marathon during lockdown, which was, I think we all lost our minds a little bit, didn't we? But I learned a lot about myself during the challenge, let's just say that.
Obviously, for this, I was kind of having a look across your social platforms and everything that you've done, and we'll get into a lot of it. But there were 2 lines that stuck out. One was on your Strava that said, "In it for the endorphins," and there was another quote on your Instagram which basically said, "Running had changed your life and made you the person who you are today." I guess just to start with, kind of delve into those things. Like, how has this shaped you?
Hugely. Kind of personally, professionally, it's a part of my whole life. And I think if you'd said to kind of 14-year-old me that would have been the case, I would have laughed at you. I was listening to your episode with Lily earlier and I was like, we have that in common. Wasn't a sporty teenager, but just got very lucky, I think, that I landed my first journalism job at Women's Health and had this kind of passion for health, well-being, and in particular running, because my dad was always a runner. I have such fond memories of watching him at the London Marathon and being like, I could never do that. And then getting offered a place with cancer research my first year I was working at Women's Health and just going, okay, maybe let's give this a go and just see if I can achieve the seemingly absolutely impossible to myself at the time. I think running has taught me that you can achieve anything if you put your mind to it. We are all so much more resilient than we think we are. And it's also, I think, amazing for just teaching you kind of discipline, and that, I don't know, my mantra for life is kind of, if you work hard at things, often, not always, but most of the time, you'll kind of get where you want to go. So it's shaped all aspects of my life. I'm sure all runners say that, though, that they're like, it's changed who I am as a person. But it does. It really does.
I think people say that as well, because there are these kind of consistent messages within running that kind of everybody has, and their story is different in some ways, but has been shaped by that consistent message. And as you said, one of those things is that turning up every day, that working hard thing, kind of leading to a common goal. And you can put that into every aspect of your life as well. And I'm sure that's helped you on your career path, your personal path, and obviously your running path. I just want to touch on the professional career to start with, because I think this is probably something you have as well, and I certainly feel it. I feel like being in this sort of space, it's a real privilege to be able to talk to the people that I get to talk to and like take little bits and little snippets from each person and each conversation. Is that something you felt over the years in sort of both the first role and kind of where you are now?
Without doubt. I think I am so incredibly lucky in my line of work to feel like I learn every single day. You can never know everything, especially within health, well-being, running specifically. There's so many different kind of new emerging fields of research, and even within female specific endurance training, there's so much that still needs to be done there and so much that we're learning there. So I feel very, very lucky that I learn every day. But also that I get to meet amazing experts kind of day in, day out. And our whole kind of, and my whole goal when I joined Marie Claire as their health editor was to try and just make all of this, what can seem quite overwhelming or daunting body of research or, new studies or whatever it might be, slightly less overwhelming and just more bite-sized for the average woman at home or man at home who really likes running but might be intimidated by the idea of it, or has always wanted to get into a healthy routine or build healthy habits. But it's like, that's not for me because I don't have half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it might be. So I think I've found a real joy in kind of connecting all of these amazing experts and papers and whatever it might be, launches that I have access to, but, you know, watering it down almost for our readers into a more accessible package, which makes them go, oh, that could actually, maybe, you know, I could habit stack my, whatever it is, heel raises or physio that I need to do every morning while I'm brushing my teeth, or, you know, I could add a little bit of protein. The concept with nutrition and training of what you can add versus what you can take away, and just trying to really promote this, like, health and well-being can be so empowering. It doesn't need to be daunting. I think when I started my career, we were in that peak, quite toxic clean eating era of taking stuff away versus what can health and well-being add to our lives. And I feel incredibly privileged that we're now in this era of it being coming from, I hope, not always the case, but a much more positive place.
And I think because we've come through that negative space as well, and we are now seemingly in this place where it's become, I don't want to say fashionable, but it's become much more in kind of the day-to-day thoughts of a lot of people. It feels that this is something that is going to hopefully carry on for a long period of time. Has it felt to you that there has been this significant shift over the past kind of, I think it's since COVID?
It is 100%. It's been since COVID, and like all of our stats on Marie Claire back that up. Like the appetite for health and fitness content, and kind of normally the more entry level accessible, you know, like 10-minute Pilates workouts or whatever it might be that you could do on your lunch break from home. But then also the slightly more advanced kettlebell or, you know, weighted workouts or high rocks based things that you would think maybe for our readers they wouldn't be the most interested in. The appetite has just gone through the roof. And I think because when I first joined Marie Claire, it was during COVID, or kind of just as we were locking down. We were like, oh, is this interest just going to be for now, as we're having to be so conscious of our health, and this kind of global pandemic is making us reassess our healthy habits, and also because we couldn't get outside a lot. So then obviously you crave what you can't have, or people just kind of getting really into their running right now because you can't be outside running for as long as you want to be. And actually that's just not the case. The figures are absolutely unbelievable. But I think it's been quite a long time coming. And I actually think I love when I go and do my Sunday long runs now, and I just see all these little bubbles of different London running collectives like storming down the South Bank or wherever it might be. I think there's a real joy in kind of finding your fitness community, and I don't see that going away anytime soon, because there's also so many branches of it now. You've got all the High Rocks world, and even from within that you've got the kind of gym goers, you've got Pilates, which is just having the biggest moment, and then of course our one true love, running. Everyone is running. All of my friends are doing London Marathon this year for the first time ever, and I'm like, welcome to the club. I will answer all of your questions. But it's great because I'm like, I've been here for a while and I've been waiting to have friends to properly talk to about it, and now they're like, okay, training shoes or sports bra do I need, and do you really need to take gels? And I'm like, yes, but maybe not the caffeine ones if you haven't tried those before. So it's great.
Unless you're close to a toilet. Yeah, it's I think what and I've described it as this on the podcast in the past, but I can't think of a better way of describing it. It's almost like we've been in the cupboard, right? We've been in Narnia, and now a lot of other people are opening the doors, and I think they're like stepping in and they're being like, oh my God, look at this. I wish I'd come here before. And it's quite nice kind of being in it and seeing people come in and getting that, you know, that benefit that we all had when we started out.
One of my best friends is training for her first marathon, for the London Marathon at the moment, and she said to me the other day, oh my goodness, that feeling of getting home from a long run when you've achieved whatever it is, 19 kilometres, 20 kilometres, and you can just sit on the sofa and eat what you want and enjoy relaxing all day because you know you've achieved so much. And I was like, yeah, it's been a long time since I've had that specific kind of first time feeling. And it's so great seeing other people kind of access it for the first time. Because I'm like, this probably won't be your first, you know. And she's like, no, it's just a one, you know, tick it off the bucket list. It's a one-time thing. And I'm like, that's what I said as well.
I think there is that fundamental shift that has to happen though. And I think actually we're probably hitting that for a lot of people at the moment, where they've got into running or got into fitness or health, and kind of it has been part of their routine, But it's like after those firsts happen, I think that's almost the most important time, because it's like, how are you going to implement this into your routine? Is it going to remain in your routine, or are you going to do what I have done over the years, and I know a lot of people have done over the years, do a race, drop off a cliff, don't do anything for a while, and then like reset and try and go again. I think that part of building it into your routine is almost the most important part.
You're so right. I also do think I am currently on a running hiatus, very sadly, because I injured myself before Christmas opening the door to the postman, and I got so initially grumpy about it because I was like, what is life without running? And actually, it's been a really lovely month. I've done loads of cycling, stationary, obviously, because I'm absolutely rubbish at cycling, not on, on a moving bike, not for me. Pilates, weight training. And I think almost shifting your mindset to remember that most of us are busy working individuals with a million things on. And sometimes being in this running world, I've been part of the community for maybe 10 years now. I've had a coach for 5. It can almost feel like a tick box mission of, when's the next race? When's the next PB? And Lily and I talk about this so much. Running should never just be about the next thing or the next PB. And it's meant to be about the joy of it, the mental health boost, running with your friends, finishing, with a pastry and a coffee, and finding that time to socialize and find community. And I think taking a step back sometimes, or being forced to in the case of injury, and kind of reminding yourself that actually having those off seasons is also really important for recovery, for being able to have the mental resilience to keep going and pursuing your goals, is kind of as important as cracking through all of these amazing training blocks. Like, I think I've been quite lucky. My first London was 2018, didn't have a coach. I then did London again. I think it must have been year after. Then there was the COVID years. So third London was my first with a coach. But it had given me quite a lot of consistent time off between that to get to grips with kind of what coached running was like, as opposed to just following my Runner's World, which I still stand by and love and recommend for beginners, training plan. And it's so vastly different. But having that time off, I think, was really useful for me to remember how important it was for me and kind of almost refocus my mind. Whereas if you don't give yourself enough time off between the races, I'm just speaking for myself individually, some people are unbelievably good at doing it, but especially if you're working a busy job or you have kids, I think you just get to the point where you're almost setting yourself up to fail, because it is not possible to do that much with everything else going on. So I'm a big advocate for, I've only ever done one marathon a year. I say only ever, but we have so many people in this community who kind of tick through race after race after race, because I've always been quite passionate that you can do one amazing block and kind of still be training, the rest of the year, and achieve what you want to achieve.
I think and people so often reference running to life, don't they? They talk about and we already have done, to be fair, the comparisons to life in lots of different ways. But what's also very comparative, I think, and people forget, is on this kind of journey that we're all on, we all have these peaks and troughs. We all have like amazing highs and also lows. It just happens, and you kind of don't want either of them to be too big or too low, because it's kind of like that they're the moments that then you relate everything else to. And I feel like that's what running is as well. It's like, you want to enjoy the highs, but you want to accept that sometimes you're going to have those periods where you have to drop your mileage a little bit, and whether that be injury or whether it be work commitments or whether it be personal commitments, it's like, it's okay not to be the person that's training for a race all of the time.
100%. Because also I often have to remind myself of this, I think, because I get such amazing opportunities through brands who will literally email and be like, right, we've got a spot at, I don't know, whatever marathon in 2 weeks, would you like to do it? And I'm like, well, I could do it. But my coach is always like, what end goal are we meeting by ticking off another one? And everyone's goals are different. So if you're just someone who loves that feeling of getting around and the joy of all the cheer squads and the achievement of the mileage, absolutely brilliant. But it's almost like reassessing what your personal goals are and what's important for you, and remembering as well that the main reason I started running was kind of to boost my mental health, but also for the joy of it and for how amazing it makes you feel. And if you're constantly on or I personally find if I'm constantly on a really rigid training regime. And I say that I still probably do all the same runs when I'm not in a strict training regime. But it's almost taking the pressure off it a little bit. So the paces maybe are slightly different and you don't have to hit pace X, Y, Z. I think I've also been quite lucky with all of my marathons. I've always finished them kind of feeling like I gave a really, really good, and I couldn't have, training plan was brilliant and execution was brilliant, but I always finished them as like, oh, there's a little bit more in the tank there, I think, which is a really privileged and nice position to be in, because it means you give yourself a bit of time off and then you're like, right, what's the next one then? And I know a lot of people aren't as fortunate with that. You can go it's all dependent on the day, isn't it? There's so many factors on a race day that can impact how you perform. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for my next one, definitely.
When we were talking about injury there a moment ago, and you kind of said about, doing stuff on the bike at home, and also the Pilates thing. I know you posted about that recently. I saw on your Instagram, and we spoke about firsts. And I think as well, it's important as runners, we remind ourselves of firsts. Sometimes we remind ourselves of what it was like when we first started running. And yeah, we're not going to get that again. But you can get that in other spaces. You can go to a Pilates class. You can try high rocks. You can go and, if you want to do triathlon. Go and try some open water swimming. Like, just because we are quote unquote runners, and just because you kind of have that as part of, let's be honest, for a lot of us, part of our personalities, it doesn't mean that you can't kind of get out of that bubble from time to time.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to, again, this is our whole kind of brand ethos for Health at Marie Claire. It's like, do whatever brings you the most happiness or joy. So if Saturday, it might be like going for a yoga class with your best friend who you haven't seen for a while and you can have a catch up with. Or even like going for a run. I run with my siblings quite a lot along the river, and like, is it at the pace that I would probably normally run at, or with my dad? No, but is it a lot more enjoyable and probably a longer distance than I would go for by myself, because I'm with good company and we're catching up. I think there's pros and cons to everything, and it's just kind of, you're only going to stick at a fitness regime or routine if you genuinely enjoy it and it doesn't feel like a chore. And I think that's what's so important. It's like keep mixing things up a bit sometimes, keeping them fresh and just being like, okay. And I know obviously my coach would scream at me, if you're marathon training, don't do that. Just stick to the plan. Make sure you tick off exactly what he's asked you to do where you can, or she's asked you to do. But I don't know. I think mixing it up a bit when you're not in that peak training season is just so important for like mental health and enjoyment and general well-being. Trying something new, I think, as an adult as well, is so humbling and a really, really great way to like encourage your almost childlike, just beginner level of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to have fun with it and I'm going to enjoy it. And I might look like a total fool. I look like an idiot in Pilates and yoga most of the time, but I'm still quite enjoying it,
And it reminds you as well of what it's like to be a beginner, because I think sometimes you kind of take it for granted, right? And we mentioned Lily a couple of times. Do go and listen to Lily's episode. I'll put that in the description. When she was on, she was talking about the fact that we all now think this is normal, right? And I think actually being a beginner at something, again, reminds us that what we're doing isn't normal, quote unquote. And when people are coming into the space, like, you sometimes, and we all do it, you need to make sure that you give them the grace and the support that they need at that time.
Yeah, and remembering even the things that I know that I worried about when I first started training. It's like so wildly different to probably what I worry about now, because as with anything in life, if you haven't done it a lot, you're going to have those questions and those. It's also the biggest thing when I first trained for a marathon was, am I actually going to be able to do it? And that all like encompassing fear of having to be the one who stopped at mile 20 or 22 or whatever it might be, which can happen. And isn't the end of the world if it does. But when you've trained so hard and you've worked so long at a goal and you don't know if you can do it, it can be quite scary. So I think it's just meeting friends in the middle who are in that position, and also going, it will be so worth it for that feeling when you cross the finish line and you know that you did do what you didn't think you could achieve. It is unbeatable, and I think it's that feeling that keeps us going back, doesn't it? Alongside, I love being in a training cycle, because I think for me it's when I'm my most consistent, it's when my mental health is the best. it's when I'm most productive at work, I think, because I'm so, you have to be so organised with everything. And actually my mental clarity is always a bit better because I know I'm getting good mileage in, and the endorphins, always in it for the endorphins.
Do you think that is part of kind of that structured nature of being in a training block? It's like this part of my life is kind of taken away from me, really. Like I'm just kind of told what I have to do. I do that, and then I can almost focus on everything else.
Yeah, I think there's so much power in that. And that's actually why anyone who's kind of semi-serious about their running or their training, I always, the best thing I ever did was get a coach. I'm all for, and I'm an advocate for, doing a little bit of this here and there, and finding what movement you love is key. But if you know you love running and you want to progress it, or you're just overwhelmed at how you're meant to fit it all in, or not sure how to structure it, you hear people talking about speed sessions and you're like, what are those and how on earth do I fit them in? The best thing you can ever do, or the best thing I ever did, was invest in a coach, because it keeps you accountable. It means you've got someone to talk through all your sessions with. But also I think it's an investment into your health, because you are choosing, you get to the point, don't you, where you go, actually, this means a lot to me and I want to progress it, and I want to see what I can do, see what I can achieve, see how far we can push this. I think if you'd said to my first marathon, I think it was 4 hours and 11 minutes. And if you'd said to 20, however old I was, Ali, that I'd be a 3:15 marathon in a couple of years' time, and I would have done an ultra marathon, I would have been like, no. That's the 4 hour mark is where we're going to sit around. So I think it can just exceed all expectations of yourself if you put that consistent training block in and take the stress out of it, because you're not having to force yourself to do it almost. You've got someone else just saying, here's the plan, here's what we're going to work through. And it simplifies everything. It makes it a lot less complicated, I think.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on the coaching side of things as well, because I didn't have a coach for, forever. And really the last 18 months, I started like a coaching journey, and I was always the guy that was like, hey, I've not in an arrogant way, I don't think, but in the way like I've done this and I've done that, and I've trained myself to this race and that race, but I hadn't really trained myself for performance. I just trained myself to complete, right? And I think when I started that journey, the one thing that I related to the most that you just said was kind of like that bit of extra headspace, like the thought of, or the not thought really, of having to really think about anything. It was just like, I get up, I do this, and that's it. I can't believe I'm going to kind of compare this to Mark Zuckerberg, but when he, I read an interview with him once that he was saying like he wears the same clothes every day, right? And that's just a thing he doesn't have to think about. And I think that is something we all have. We all have incredibly busy lives. We all do a lot of things. So if you can just take something off your plate, it gives you more mental headspace to do other stuff.
100%. And it feeds into all areas of health and wellness, I think. And I think that's why so many people in the UK, there's so many facets to it, right? But it's overwhelming, and you're told 5,000 different things from 5,000 different people on many different social platforms about what's optimal for well-being, and then what you should, and that sometimes isn't the same as what would take, or boost your running fitness. And should you be focusing on cardio or strength training, and actually should it be high protein or high carb? Or there's so much information out there that I completely understand. I was once the completely overwhelmed reader going, this is all, none of this makes sense, and it all contradicts each other. And so I actually think any articles, I would say, that have really brilliant qualified experts and hyperlinked studies in, experts on social media who have the relevant qualifications and who can kind of guide you, are the best place to start. But then if you're in a position to be able to afford to invest in a coach, my coach Andy is just like, honestly, my hero. I love him. He's like just so the opposite of me and very blunt, and like I keep being like, can I start running again? Yeah, it's been 6 weeks, and he's like, still no, still stay on the bike. And I'm like, please. But it works really well because, exactly as you said, takes all the thought out of it. I get his little weekly check-ins, just being like, right. And also, I would say, quite an important point, regularly he gives me speed sessions or splits for long runs that I'm like, there's no way I can do that. And if I'd been programming it myself, or even maybe adjusting it from an online plan, I would have gone, no, I can't do that. So I'll make it slower. But he is a qualified expert in this field that's been working with athletes for over 20 years. So he knows that I can, and it means that I go into the session with his backing thinking, oh, maybe I'll give it a go if he thinks I can do it. Even with all my marathon times up, I'm like, Andy, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, no, you can. And it almost gives you this second layer of like, I don't know, superpower, because you go, oh, I could do that. I just didn't believe myself that I could have achieved it. So having someone else almost fight your corner and also have an objective stance looking at your splits and your progression and your current fitness. It also goes the other way when I've been wildly optimistic about races when I haven't consistently trained for a couple of months, and Andy's like, let's just be realistic about what we're going to achieve here. So it's just good to have someone in your corner kind of being, realistic for you both ways. Most of the time it's in a really, really positive light because I don't believe or back myself enough. And then when you've got someone going, no, you can definitely do that, and they turn out to be right, it's an incredibly empowering feeling, I think.
It's that shift in thought process of investment as well, because I know, you will have heard it, coaches are really expensive, and look, no one's shying away from the fact that a lot of the time it is a big monthly outlay or a big 3 monthly commitment or 6 monthly commitment, however you're doing it. But it's that shift in, and this is something I can only speak to on a personal level, like I would never have thought about going out for dinner and spending X amount on one meal out that I'm going to get a short-term gratification of. I'm not saying I don't still do that, because I definitely do, but it's that thing of like, right, I'm going to get a lot more long-term gratification out of this investment into my health. And as you've said, like, investing in your health is never a bad thing, rather than that. And I think it's kind of like shifting your perspective of where you're putting your finances sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. But also, I think as a world, to be honest, not even just the UK, we are still so, even if it's not so obvious now as like, the clean eating peak of 2016, 2017, or even early noughties, heroin chic, tiny size zero model boom, we're still obsessed with quick fixes, sadly, because we're all impatient. Or in my opinion, as an editor, especially within health, people want to feel better or more energized or less fatigued or fitter within like a day. And obviously that would be brilliant if there was a world where that could happen. But I honestly think that my biggest advice always to anyone who's like, oh, what should I try? Or what's, the biggest, best supplement or best technique that you found? And I'm like, there's not a best supplement or a best workout or a best nutrition plan. It's just about being consistent with whatever works for you and your body. Everyone's bodies are different. And even with regard to like our training cycles and our training plans, men training versus women, there's going to be different approaches that work better for different people. But what will always trump all of that is just being consistent. And I know I started to really see results with my running. We kind of touched on earlier, I said, oh, do your training block and then have some time off to do all the other kind of workouts and other things that you enjoy. Actually, I saw the best results for Berlin 2023 because I'd kind of trained all year for it, not at marathon mileage. But Andy was just like, should we give it a go and get some shorter distances in here? And it's that shift. And I know, again, Lily spoke about it when you guys did your podcast, but it's that shift from it kind of being an add-on to your life and something you think, oh, I might go for a run this weekend. And it actually just becoming quite a core part of who you are and something that you don't question anymore, you just do. And I think it's a really, again, like joyful shift because there are no quick fixes. And I think if you're just adding health on as a kind of, oh, I might give this a go, you're never going to see the results that you want with it. And you're also never going to feel your best. Whereas if you kind of are constantly thinking, even when you're out for dinner, say you're getting a pizza, could you get a side salad to go with it so you've got a bit of fibre in there, or add some, whatever it might be, so you've got a bit more protein? It's like, what can you add always that can boost your health and that will just, you know, help you stay on track, help you stay consistent? Because that's all it is. I think there's no magic. It's just drinking your water, but drinking it every day, and getting your runs in, but getting them in consistently, and eating 80-20 vegetables as much as you can. It's consistency, but that's not sexy, and you can't sell consistency. So that's where the problem lies, I think.
Yeah. And it's also that, like, oh God, to be healthy, I have to do this. I've got to eat a salad. I've got to go for a run. I've got to do this and I've got to do that. And it's like, until you actually try and build it into your life and maybe not quite think of it like that, like you have to do it. Like, I know when I started running, I was like, at some points over my journey, I've wanted to lose weight, or I've wanted to do this, or I've wanted to do that. And you're like, you think, I have to run because this is what running is going to do. And it's like, it's not. It's trying to think about it like, I know it's cliche to say I get to run, but you kind of do. You don't have
100%.
to do anything.
It's getting to do it. And I always love Esme, who's like a personal trainer, an amazing runner who I work with a lot for Marie Claire. That's like the mantra of her Say Yes Club, which is her running club, is you don't have to do anything, you get to. And that comes from a place of her having quite a bad injury years and years ago, not knowing if she'd be able to walk again, let alone run. And I think obviously I'm very much in that mindset at the moment because I'm injured. So every time I see a runner, I'm like, lucky you get to run. And it's so easy to forget that, especially when you're in a really intense training block and you're trying to jam it in, you know, amongst meetings and whatever else it is that you've got on. But it is such a privilege to be able to move our bodies in the way that we do. Even if we look at the number of people globally who complete marathons, we are in such a bubble of people who are going above and beyond to keep chipping away at those times, because we love it, because of our love for the sport and our passion for the community and the kind of cheer squad vibes and all of it. But I think that it's unique, isn't it? Because most people will tick off a marathon as their bucket list one time ever. But no, to come back to the kind of point about Esme, I always try and return to that. We get to, we don't have to, which obviously can feel awful when it's like 5 a.m. and it's raining outside and you're like, why on earth am I doing this training plan? But will be amazing, the finish line feeling again, or even the sense of accomplishment, knowing that you made that time for yourself and your body, even when, you know, you can't control the weather on race day. You also can't control how life is going to go. And I think running can sometimes be, this is so cheesy, but quite a good metaphor for that, because things might get stressful. They likely will. You know, you never know what's going to happen with your job or where you're living or the economy, anything like that. And I think actually pushing yourself through quite grueling training blocks sometimes just reminds you that you can still get up and go and do it and achieve what you want to within reason, if you have that kind of mental resilience and grit and determination just to keep on keeping on. That's what I always say. Keep on keeping on, even if I can't run at the moment. I'll be on the bike.
You mentioned a little while ago, like running with your dad. And I think, yeah, it's those special moments like that as well that kind of put into the forefront how special running can be. You also mentioned about him doing the marathon back in the day and you thinking, I could never do that. And you've obviously, to this point, like you say, have done 9. But last year it was kind of, I guess, that moment where you saw yourself up on the billboards with that partnership with New Balance and that opportunity that you had. That must have felt quite full circle. And also, when things like that happen, how do you digest them?
It was the biggest privilege of my life to be asked by them, to be honest. And also, I think I felt like a slight fraud because it was the first year in about 5 years that I had decided proactively to focus on shorter distance. So everyone was like, wow, you're running London. And I was like, no, I'm actually not this year. For the first time in a very long time. But it was just such a joy and a kind of mind-blowing thing to be asked, number one. And then I think number two, I just loved the way they kind of went about the whole campaign, which was just shooting real runners and kind of people who have busy lives but have started amazing run clubs or who are advocating for change when it comes to, you know, research on female athletes and what we can achieve over an endurance distance. So that it was kind of real runners from loads of different communities up and down the UK, I just thought was so special. But yeah, I don't think I will ever forget that kind of week of having various friends going to the expo and just sending me like me on a tube sign, or me. I had no concept or understanding of how many of them there were going to be and how big they were going to be. So I kind of thought they were going to be maybe this big little, you know, like next to the clothes, just to demonstrate what the clothes might look like on. And then I started getting these texts. I was like, oh my goodness, they're huge. But I think just a full circle moment, kind of as you touched on, because yeah, my dad had always been like, you can achieve anything you put your mind to. And it's like seeing me again, the girl who skipped PE and, you know, just had no interest or just didn't think that she'd be capable of doing those things, kind of included in such an amazing campaign. I was just like quite mind blown. It was, yeah, unbelievable.
We've kind of touched on the research into females in running and sport, and you know, kind of the lack thereof. I feel like that's something that's really getting talked about a lot more now, which is, I mean, a bit of a travesty in the fact that it hasn't been talked about as much as it is now to this point, to be totally honest. And it almost makes you feel, I'm speaking as me here, who, you know, hadn't looked into it, I feel quite, I don't know what the right word is. I almost feel a bit guilty that I hadn't realised there hadn't been the research, that there hadn't been. Now I feel like it is getting brought to the forefront a little bit more, and people are starting to talk about it, and there are these strong women in the running space and athletic space that are really pushing the conversation. From I guess the start of your career to now, does it feel like we're getting to a point now where we're kind of opening up that conversation?
We definitely are. There's definitely still a long way to go, though, is what I'd say. So even as an example, and also I would definitely say, don't ever feel guilty, because so many of these statistics I've only learned over the course of my career, and a lot of them are quite well hidden because, you know, kind of certain fields don't want you to know that. Even the running trainer, there wasn't a female-specific running trainer designed until 2022. I'm pretty certain. I will fact check that because I don't want to. But that's it. All running shoe designs had always been based on the male foot, which obviously maybe you'd assume, oh, there's not that much of a difference, but there actually are quite a lot of physiological differences between men and women. So I think it just gets a bit frustrating to almost feel like you're an afterthought, or you're on the back foot, or even as a woman in some of the, you know, speedier start pens at races. I remember standing on the start line in Berlin and just counting the number of women, and I think there were 5 in total in about 100, 250 maybe people pen. So you can fully understand why women just go, that's not for me, that's really daunting. You kind of got all the statistical lack of research. I think it's 9% of all research on endurance sports has been done on women. That's absolutely obscene. Because also the Lululemon Further project, which kicked off a couple of years ago now, which is kind of looking into female-specific ultra marathon and endurance training, has found a lot of really, really interesting things about how well women are actually able to deal with pain and deal with the kind of stress of an ultramarathon. And again, this is all still completely to be confirmed, but some of the things they spoke about when I met with them, again, a couple of years ago now, was like women go through childbirth and grow babies. And so they were looking at that difference in ages and how women then deal with ultramarathons after giving birth. So many people have always assumed that once women give birth, their fitness would automatically decrease or declines. And actually, the challenge isn't that the kind of physiological ability isn't there. The challenge is your time and not having the time to train, because stereotypically, traditionally, you've got the mothers at home with the babies. So then it's not actually about that we can't achieve loads and even get better, you know, as we get older, get more physically fit. It's that you've got all those kind of more social challenges and implications of having to be looking after the baby, which is all changing, definitely. And I think there are amazing, even that, like Lululemon funded that massive research project, and there's loads else going on in that sphere. We're seeing amazing women achieve amazing things. Jasmine.
Jasmine Paris. I was going to say this. I was literally going to say the same thing. Insane. Insane.
And so many across the board, which I think does an amazing thing also of reminding, if women don't see role models like that and they don't see examples of themselves in doing those amazing ultramarathons or marathons or whatever it might be, if I have to stand on a start line and feel a bit out of place because there's only 5 or so of us in that, start pen, it's another barrier to entry and another reason why I might go, oof, maybe I shouldn't be here or whatever it is. So things are definitely changing. Things are looking up. We're seeing brands pour a lot of money into the relevant research, the relevant kit. And, I think we're all talking about it more now. But even, you've got the whole safety perspective, running after dark. I could honestly talk about this for about 20 years, so please do stop me at any point. Bottom line, things are definitely changing and improving, but there's still so much to do, I would say. And all we need to continue doing is just advocating for women in sport and making sure women feel like it's a space for them and that they're, not overwhelmed or not actively, encouraged to be there.
And I think that's what I was going to kind of lead on with and say it's kind of all up to us as well. Like every single person in the athletics, running, just every person in general, to keep pushing that conversation, not let that conversation fall by the wayside, because without pushing it and without talking about it and without having these conversations, it doesn't move where we are forward. So I think almost the most important thing and the most the biggest thing that you can do if you're listening to this now is to keep pushing that conversation. Have those conversations with friends. As a bloke, have conversations with your female friends in the athletic space. Talk to them about, the different things that we've covered here, but also anything that you might not understand, questions you might have. I think everybody is willing to talk. It's just because those questions aren't asked sometimes that things don't come up.
I think that's spot on. And I also think you can get so almost bogged down with all this top line, the lack of funding for the research and the lack of female specific designs. And like can all feel quite overwhelming, or even the physiological or societal reasons why women don't seem to be able to find as much time to be active. Like all of that is a bit overwhelming. It's really as simple as like, if your friend says to you, oh, I've been thinking about getting into running, inviting them to park run as a woman and making sure that you're there together and you're showing them that it can be a joy and there's a space for you there. I think it can be as simple as that. Because for the normal person at home, they're probably not going to be, they'll probably be shocked that there's such a lack of research on female specific kind of sports. But does it feel like it relates to you day to day? There's also a massive the importance of getting younger girls into sport is so key. And I've worked with the Women in Sport charity a lot with, for our Marie Claire Women in Sport covers. And there's so many statistical reasons why young girls just feel overwhelmed or skip out on sport, and actually just finding fun ways to encourage young girls into sport. They don't, statistically, young women and young girls are encouraged into kind of solo sports like gymnastics more than team sports. And there's a lot to be said for kind of retention rate and returning to team sports, because you're doing it with your friends and you're enjoying it and it's slightly more social. So just trying to encourage young girls as much as possible where we can, making sure that they kind of got the right access to. Chrissy Seeler, who's an amazing personal trainer, is kind of going into schools around the UK at the moment and teaching young girls to weightlift and donating the appropriate kit so they feel properly supported when they are working out. Things like that all make a huge world of difference, I think, because it's so important for mental health, for, how your life will go, I think, if you can nurture a positive relationship with exercise from a young age.